Hi, I'm Nikki from Find Me Crafting. You ever have one of those craft projects that you absolutely love and then you just keep finding more and more reasons to love it, more and more people to give it to, and it just has so many uses? I've got one of those for you. It's a clipboard, right? Very basic, but these are super cute clipboards. You can add whatever you want to them. You can personalize with names. I like to put some of the names on the back. And you know what these are great for? Literally everything. These are fantastic for students. These are great for traveling. Let's say you're busy driving around to all the activities and kids have homework. These are great for in the car so they can do homework, they can color. These are also great for teachers and coaches, right? I like to put the name on the back so that they're walking around actually using it. Their name is visible. These are so great, and you can personalize them however you want. They're super easy and fun. Come on, let me show you how. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any new patterns or projects. You need a wooden clipboard. These are the two different styles I like to use. I bought both of them from Walmart. This is a larger clamp. This is a smaller, flatter clamp, and there are advantages to each of them. The larger clamp I feel like is a lot stronger. So if you wanted to hold papers, like more quantity of paper very strongly, then the large clamp may be the way to go. If you're okay with it being, this one's great for traveling because it's easier to store, because it's flatter. It does hold papers pretty securely, just not as many. So both of these will work the exact same way. You just need to decide which one you want to go with. And then on my website, I do have this template, and you would cut here. That gives you about the right width of paper, a little bit extra, but that makes it easier for future steps. And then for the large clamp, you would cut here and then cut out this space here. And then you can, with the templates, you'll get pretty close to the top here, to the edges, so that you have paper all the way up to the edge and next to the clamp. So this is available for free on my website. You're going to need some patterned paper. I like to use 3 different papers for the front and the back of the clipboards. You don't have to do the back, obviously, or you could just do the back and not the front, because that's going to be covered by stuff. Whatever you choose to do. You can use 8.5 by 11 paper. You just need to turn it sideways. So make sure your pattern isn't running vertically, because it'll look kind of silly turned sideways. But I tend to like the 12 by 12 because then I can turn it any which way I want. And I use 3 different coordinating papers for each clipboard. You're going to need some Mod Podge. I like the gloss. You could probably also do the matte kind if you'd like. You do not need this big of a tub of Mod Podge. I use a lot of Mod Podge, so I have the huge tub. You do not need this much though. You need foam brushes. You need some clear acrylic sealer. Any brand will do. This is one I've liked a lot. Mod Podge does also sell one as well that is quite great. This is just what I happen to have on hand. You will need sanding blocks and possibly also an emery board. The emery board is just for getting in some of the tight spaces near the top. So really, you don't have to have it. It is just useful. And then the sanding blocks are going to make the job quite a bit easier than just using this. I've done it with this. Takes a while though. You're going to need a paper trimmer and some tiny scissors for cutting your template. You're also going to need a paper plate and a damp piece of paper towel. Just get it wet with water, wring it out. So you just need it to be damp for keeping your foam sponge damp in between coats of Mod Podge, so it doesn't dry and get crusty and then you have to get a new one. You're going to need a scraper. Doesn't have to be this huge, but it's kind of awesome. So whatever size your scraper is will work great. You're also going to want a self-healing cutting mat and either an X-Acto knife, or this is the Cricut True Control knife or blade. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like an X-Acto knife. And if you're putting a name on your clipboard, I also like to use this 2-way glue to attach the name that I've cut out of pattern paper. Whichever one you're doing, you're going to want to trim the template so that you can use it. I'm going to use a paper trimmer. It just makes it go faster. And it will print. So there's a tiny bit of edge. You can see the edge right here. You don't have to cut that off, but it will give you a slightly better sizing if you do. So I like to test out the template once I get it on here and make sure that it's really going to fit. If you have any spots that are a little too big, it's easy to take an X-Acto knife, or this is a Cricut blade, and you can come in while it's on here and trim down any excess bits so that when you put this on your pattern paper, you're going to get just the right fit. But obviously each clipboard might be slightly different, or maybe yours is a different brand. So, you know, you can customize it a little bit to fit just right. Next up, I'm going to take my pattern paper, the one that I want to put up near the clamp at the top, and I'm going to flip it over so I'm looking at the back. And I'm going to take my template and lay that face down as well. I don't want to have any stray pen marks or pencil marks on this front here that I want to show. So I'm going to draw on the back so that it doesn't matter. I'm going to line it up near the top and just trace it on. This particular piece I have sized to be a little over 4 inches because I'm going to once again put 3 different blocks of pattern paper, different ones on the front, but that's about 4 inches. It gets you about the third of what you want to put on the front total. I'm going to cut out my paper. I do like to use the paper trimmer because I normally get a nice straight line, which I definitely cannot say if I'm using my own questionable scissor skills. I am going to now put this on, test it out, make sure it looks the way I want. If not, you know, adjust as needed, cut more, cut less, whatever you gotta do. This for me is fitting pretty well, pretty close to it. I may trim a bit of this off once I get going here. That's the hardest part, is getting up near the clamp. Once you've got that done, now you have to make sure you cut your other papers the right size to fill the rest of the clipboard. I'm just going to measure the space that I've left for myself here and divide in half. I'm at a little less than 8.5. So about 4 1/4 is what I'm going to want to make each of the remaining 2 papers. So that looks like it's going to cover the whole front when I butt them up next to each other with a little bit of overhang all the way around. That's how I like to do it. I find I can get the most perfect measurement when I do that. I am going to repeat this whole process for the back side of my clipboard, obviously, but as I'm applying layers of Mod Podge to the front, I only like to work on one side at a time because otherwise you're going to end up fumbling around and touching one side, and those fingerprints will be visible if you let them dry in there. So I'm just going to work one side at a time. So just know that you are going to have to cut these same size papers, do the whole thing for the back side if you're decorating the back side. I just don't do it at this point because I want to get this side done first. So now it's time to break out the Mod Podge as I'm working, because you have to do a couple layers of Mod Podge on top of all of it. In between, I'm going to wrap my sponge, my foam sponge, in a damp paper towel, because otherwise this will dry with the Mod Podge on it and you can't use it because you end up with these chunky lumps on your foam brush. And I don't want to use a different foam brush each time I put on a layer. So I will be wrapping it in this paper towel to keep it moist in between layers. Okay, I had to switch bottles of Mod Podge because one of my kids got red glitter in my other Mod Podge, leaving it kind of pink. So I don't want to pinkify this. But when I'm using Mod Podge, I like to pour some out onto my plate and then just work from there. And then when I'm done, I can put it back in if I want, but I don't want to have to keep squeezing the bottle. So, and now I'm going to apply a fairly thin layer underneath here. And I'm just going to do it section by section. So I'm just going to start with the top section and apply a thin layer right up here to this top part where my first paper is going to go. So now, holding my clamp out of the way, which gets to be kind of exhausting. All right, I'm going to apply the paper and move it around until it's where I want it to be. And I'm gonna stick it all down. Smooth it. And if there's any spots here that you didn't get as much or you missed, not a big deal. You just pick it up and apply some of the Mod Podge and stick it back down. You want to get all the way to the edge, but I'm not focusing on the edges right now. Applying glue, I will later, but I'm not doing that yet. So So there we go. I've got my first piece down. I'm just going to repeat that process. I'm going to put my excess Mod Podge. I'm going to repeat the process for the next layers. Stuff dries pretty fast. That's how it feels. So that's why I don't do the whole thing all at once, because I'll have sections of the glue drying before I've applied my paper. And as it's drying, sometimes you will get some bubbles. Like, I don't know if you can see. Yeah, you can. You can see the bubble right there. I'm going to gently try to squish that out. You don't want to press too hard. You will rip the paper. I could tell you how I know that, but it ain't pretty. So just know that you have to be gentle with this part. But as it's drying, you want to make sure that it's laying flat. Because once again, those bubbles will survive this process. You will end up with a bubble at the very end on your clipboard, which will last forever because these things are really quite durable. I have some that have been used for upwards of about 15 years and they still look pretty new. These will hold up. As per the bottle, you're supposed to wait about 15 to 20 minutes between coats. So I'm going to give this 15 to 20 minutes to dry. And like I said, in the meantime, I'm going to be wrapping my foam brush into this wet paper towel so that I can use this again when I come back to it. This part too, I'm also going to keep reusing. So I'm going to get another wet paper towel and just kind of loosely drape it over the top here so that I can keep working with this without any of it drying. While I'm waiting for that side to dry, I'm going to be working on cutting the papers for the back side because I want this on both sides. I think it looks really cool that way. So I'm going to cut the same pieces that I did for the front for the back. So I'm going to wait 15 to 20 minutes for both sides so that this coat is all dry. And in the meantime, I'm going to go cut some letters because I want to put the teacher's name right here on the back. So I'm going to use my Cricut to cut some letters for that. I cut my name out of patterned paper as well. And it is going to go on the back versus the front. One, because I think when she's using it, if she was carrying it around as a teacher, they'd be able to read this. And two, because I have found from experience that if you put this on the front, it'll create lines as you're writing over on top of it. So I put it on the back if I'm putting any name at all, or you could put it at the very top on the front where they're less likely to be writing. So I am going to be using a scrapbooking glue. This is just a blue two-way glue that I'm going to use to attach the name onto the back before my next step. I'm going to remove the excess here, this about 1/4 of an inch that I have all the way around, and I find the best way to do that is to have a cutting mat underneath and use the Cricut knife or an X-Acto blade and do it, because when you try to use scissors, this can happen, which is still definitely fixable if you don't have an X-Acto knife, but you will get a much cleaner cut. So this is my favorite part. So what we're going to do is use a sanding block. You can use something like that. You can use a bigger one that you're going to find like at a hardware store. This is like a scrapbooking one, I think. Or you can use an emery board. And because it's so small, this one will take you longer, but will definitely work. And all I'm going to do is sand the edges. I'm going to sand down this way against the clipboard, and I want to sand off any excess paper. And you can see right here, look at, it's perfect. It's perfectly cut. It's going to remove any jagged edges or anything like that. You're going to have something the exact right fit. I'm telling you, this is incredibly satisfying. It's the best part. And I'm going to do the front first, and then I'm going to do the back. Don't try to do them at the same time because you want to work down away from your paper. Otherwise, as you're doing this, it'll lift up the paper, which you can glue back down, but it's easier just to not remove it in the first place. If you have any spots up near the top where you want to trim it once it's done, if your paper's a little long, you can easily do that with an X-Acto knife or this Cricut blade. You can kind of peel it up because it's a little bit stiffer now that it has some Mod Podge underneath it, and you can get pretty darn close to perfect. I have a little bit of fuzz here that I'm going to try to cut away, but at this point, I'm going to begin adding my layers of Mod Podge to seal this, to seal the whole thing so that it's hard and nothing's going to rip the paper and it's going to last for forever. Back out your brush and your Mod Podge. I'm going to add more to my plate. So you're just going to add a thin layer over the top of the paper, and you can see where you've been. It's pretty, it'll be shiny after you apply. And you got to get up near the top and get all of these areas where the paper is. If you get a little on the metal, it does not matter. It'll dry clear. It'll be fine. And I do the sides as well, but I usually do those at the end. Once I have the whole top done, I will go around and smooth the edges with some more Mod Podge to make sure it's sealed on the side as well. So you got to get under the clamp. And with each layer, I'm going to go a different way. So this way, when I'm done, I'm going to kind of go side to side. And then with the next layer, I'll go up and down so that I don't end up with like grooved texture with the Mod Podge. So you do want to add a thin layer. That's the key. I'm going to do the edge, and then I'm going to do this so that it's all smooth. And don't forget the bottom, to put your layer on the edge of the bottom. Just mentally be prepared to be covered in glue for a little while after this project. It washes off pretty easily, but I feel like I kind of end up getting it all over the place on myself. I don't know why. I'm just a slob, I guess, when I craft. I'm going to give that 15 to 20 minutes. I'm going to come back and I'm going to do 3 or 4 layers just like that on the whole front. I'm going to do 3 or 4 layers on the back with 15 to 20 minutes in between of dry time. I've tried various methods of keeping the clamp raised up at least just a little bit so that it doesn't dry in your wet Mod Podge. And honestly, the best way I have found, also the most awkward, is to take something heavy. This is just my carousel thing that holds all my tools, and I set it just on top of the clamp so that it raises it up a little, and then just let it dry. You just want to make sure that whatever it is you're sitting on top is not touching the wet Mod Podge, and especially for your final coat, to let it dry like this is perfect. I did 4 coats of Mod Podge on the front, 4 on the back, and I wanted to say that if you had any bubbles after your last coat, you know, or during the process, during the coating of it, if you just leave it overnight, as long as you've been doing thin layers of the Mod Podge, it'll flatten out all on its own, which is, it's kind of magical when it does it. It's pretty phenomenal. Now, Mod Podge itself, even fully dried, is a little bit tacky, not sticky, but a little bit tacky. So I'm going to finish it off with a clear acrylic sealer. I don't want to put the sealer on the clamp, so I'm going to use some blue painter's tape. So I'm going to just cover it up so that I'm not getting any sealer on my clamp. I'm going to do that all over this clamp. Follow the instructions on the back of your sealer for dry times in between coats. I put 2 coats on the front and 2 coats on the back. Once that's completely dry, you can decide whether or not you want to add ribbons to your clamps. I cut the ribbons about the same length and then use a lighter to burn the ends so that they don't fray in the future. You're going to find a million people to give these to and a million ways that they can make your life easier. Happy crafting!